Day one. Here we go. All right. Okay. All right. We got lots going on, but hopefully now everything is working okay. Oh, I'm just picking up some comments here. Hi, Brandy. Nice to see you. Michelle, is it okay to just join on Facebook? Absolutely. If you are able to get in, which you should be now, I think the streaming is working. I was having a bit of a panic this afternoon because Zoom was not playing nice. But I figured out the issue with a technician, so we got it sorted. Hi, Molly. Nice to have you join us. I'm so glad you guys are here live. This is awesome. All right, so I'm just looking here. Live. This is awesome. Okay, so that's working. All right, so, all right, bear with me. For day one of a challenge is always interesting because I'm going to close Facebook here because what I don't want is any echoes. So now I can share this. All right. Okay, so we have Brandy who's joined us in the Zoom room as well. Hi, Brandy. Nice to see you. I'm still getting my head around this. Bear with me, guys. When we have two different formats, it's always a little bit just to get used to. But I think we're good. So please let me know if you're in the Zoom room, let me know in the chat if there's any issues with audio or visual. Hopefully you are still seeing me here on video because I certainly want you to get to know me a little bit. And more importantly, you should be seeing the front page of the workbook here, which I've just magnified a little bit because we're going to be using that as our agenda today. All right. Brandy, no worries. Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate that. And I've had Mariel helping me with audio tech, so I think we're there. Brandy says we can see you and the workbook. Wonderful. All right. Oh my gosh, that's usually the hardest part. I think we've made it through. All right, ladies. So thank you so much for those of you that have been able to make it here live. This is day one of our 3-day live challenge. I just want to go over a couple of little housekeeping things. Because we have the two formats going and I'm controlling, I feel like I'm at the front of the Starship Enterprise here with all this technology. If you have questions, I mentioned this, if you've joined us later, I mentioned this at the beginning. If you have any questions, please feel free to either pop them in the chat if you're in the Zoom room or pop them in the comments in the Facebook Live as well. And what I'm going to do is come and take a look at your questions at the end of part one. We're going to be splitting day one into 2 parts. I'll explain why in a second. And I will touch base in the chat rooms for questions as we finish part one before we head into part 2. Hopefully, questions will get answered as I go through the content, but if not, I'll pick your questions up then. So don't worry, they will definitely get answered. All right. Okay, so what's the goal for this workshop? By the way, internet connection. I am rural, so sometimes on occasion it doesn't play nice either. So please let me know if for any reason we lose connection. Don't worry, I will try to get back in. So I think that's everything from a housekeeping perspective. Okay, all right, let's dive into this. So the goal for this workshop is intended to give you clarity. What I mean by that is I've already seen with some introductions that have been coming into this group, which I appreciate so much you sharing. It's awesome for me to get to know you guys as much as you're getting to know me. But even in our new Facebook community, the Butterfly Conservatory, our free Facebook community, as people are joining there, they're sharing what they are looking for help with. And the one thing that always comes up amidst their symptoms is they want clarity on what the heck is going on. Like all of a sudden our bodies just it's almost like we don't even belong in this body anymore. We start through perimenopause and symptoms come out of nowhere. They completely throw us for a loop. And it's that overwhelm that often stops us from even thinking there might be a chance that there's something we can do about it. So we certainly want to make sure that you get clarity tonight. That's my utmost goal, because as the title of day one is, we are going to be helping to release any overwhelm and release any limiting beliefs that you might have around whether or not you even have control over this stage in your life. Okay, so this is why this has to be day one. Before we move into the real nitty gritty stuff and start talking about the nutrition strategy, which is obviously my baby, that's really where I get stuck in, and the lifestyle habits that I myself have had to make to change to get a grip on my symptoms, then you'll certainly want to make. We have to make sure that our mindset is in the right place, because that's what's going to drive us forward, keep us committed, keep us focused. Okay. And part of adopting that growth mindset, that mindset that is going to carry us through the bad days as well as the good, because they will be them. And the sooner we acknowledge that this is a real life transition we're going through, the better. But what we definitely want to do is break through any limiting beliefs that we have no control, that this is something we just have to endure, that there is no way we can reduce our symptoms. We are just in it now for the long haul, and it's just part of being a woman. That's the limiting belief I want to break through tonight. If you're with me, shout yay in the chat so I know you guys are still hearing everything okay. We are definitely going to break through those limiting beliefs, smash through the overwhelm of what is happening to you. Awesome. Thank you. Because I want you to walk away from today with the utmost clarity as to what's happening, why it's happening, where you have control. And then we're going to dive into how to go about switching up your nutrition and lifestyle strategy to start seeing improvement. Okay. So that's the goal of the workshop. We broke it up into 3 days because there's a lot, as I'm sure you can imagine. The changes that you're going to be making, they are not going, you're not going to see improvements overnight. And again, I'm all about setting real expectations, and anybody that thinks that you can change hormonal imbalance and improve your life tenfold overnight, it's not realistic, right? But that's why I believe you're here, is because you already know that. And you're looking for a natural way to be able to do whatever you can to get yourself into the best health of your life, so you can live the best life despite perimenopause as we go through. If you wanted a quick fix, then you would probably not be here, because you would be looking to take some synthetic hormone replacement therapy. And again, please let me rephrase here. If that is something that you do choose or have chosen or are debating, it is a personal choice. Absolutely. I have nothing against it for people that find that it helps them. You have to do what is right for you. I just focus on doing everything naturally because that's what's right for me. And if it resonates with you, then hopefully that's why you're here and you're certainly in the right place. Okay. All right. Resources. So you should have your day one workbook. So the half of this first page here should look familiar to you. The day one workbook will be our agenda. We're going to walk through this today. The worksheets are included at the end, which I'll explain, because that's going to be a little bit of homework you're going to want to do. And you will also have received a link in the group for the daily affirmations. So how you use them, you can either just keep them as a PDF and view them daily on your phone or on a laptop. You can print them out, and ideally for the affirmations jar that I'm hoping you're going to create for yourself, we'll talk about that later, you may want to print out the affirmations, or if the paper is too big, you can always just write the affirmations when you've had a look at them onto scraps of paper, wrap them up, and you're going to put them in your affirmations jar. So whichever way works, we're not stressing ourselves out here. It's just however it's going to best work for you. Okay. All right. So you should have the day one workbook and the affirmations. If any of this does not sound familiar, please let me know. And the assessment is the other thing that I want to mention. So there was a link in the welcome email for you to complete a hormone imbalance and root cause symptom assessment. This will get submitted. When you hit submit at the bottom, it will come to me, and I will be able to then feed back to you. The good thing is, as you're going through it, it's fairly self-explanatory what it is that we're looking for through each of the different categories of the symptoms. But if you want some feedback from me specifically as to what I see based on the patterns in your, I give that to you. So please feel free to, it's entirely to you. You don't have to hit submit and send it to me if you don't want to. You can just follow through, and hopefully it'll be eye-opening. And I'll explain what all the symptoms mean as we work through the workshop. Okay, so far so good. We've talked about questions, so I think we're good. So just a little bit about me, and then we're going to dive in. I think it's important. You guys have been seeing me blasting emails out in the group here. So I just wanted to share a little bit about me. I gave you a brief introduction in the group, but essentially I have been a registered holistic nutritionist now since 2007. So 16 years. And I became a nutritionist solely out of my desire to figure out what was going on with my body when I was, after I'd had cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, when I was 26 years old. And thankfully, it's a part of my past. I won't hang on to that, but it was a grueling time. And the treatment itself, although it cured me, it did leave me extremely unwell. I was very toxic. I was very inflamed. And that was the first time I experienced hormonal imbalance. And I didn't quite realize that's what was going on at the time. Totally makes sense now. But I wanted to heal my body from the inside out because I had been contaminated with chemicals going through chemotherapy. They did their job, and thank goodness it was there. But after the fact, I didn't want the chemicals in my body anymore. I wanted to get rid. So with the help of a naturopath, I started digging into different ways in which I could kind of cleanse my body and heal it from the inside and reduce inflammation that was a cause of all of the acidity and the imbalances that were going on as a result of such heavy treatment and the illness itself and the cancer itself. So thankfully I recovered. I went back to school because I was absolutely fascinated. Everything I learned with the nutrition, with the naturopath, was all very interesting. And there's lots of areas of alternative natural medicine which fascinate me. But in my opinion, you cannot argue with nutrition. It is the one thing that from the minute we're born until the day we die, we are constantly putting in our bodies, and we need to understand the impact, power that what we eat and how we eat has on our health going forward. Once I realized just how amazing I was starting to feel and how quickly, simply by changing my nutrition habits, I went back to school to study more. I graduated, I started Clean Living Nutrition in 2007, and everything was going dandy until 2008. 2008, I had my daughter. She's an only child because she was my miracle child. So before I dive into what went wrong, I think it's important to celebrate what went right. I was told after my cancer treatment that it was highly likely I would be infertile because I'd had some pretty heavy treatment. And I was determined, like, that's just me. I'm a determined kind of person. I was determined to do everything that I could to not just get my health back for me, but so that I could have a child. And here she came. In 2008, she came along. And I truly believe that a lot of what I did to heal my body is why she is here today. So that is a fantastic thing that happened. But unfortunately, Mother Nature had another treat in store for me. And I had a massive hormone crash. Literally within an hour of her being born, my hormones fell through the floor. And postnatal depression is, anybody that's had it, if you've had it, or anybody that has, let me know in the chat, in the comments. It was a whole different kind of challenge. Cancer is a physical challenge. This was a mental challenge. And it was when I really had to dig deep to understand what was going on to create such a wacky hormonal imbalance that was leaving me feeling a lot of the symptoms that I'm now feeling, or I certainly have started to feel, but 18 months ago. They're getting a lot better as I work through them myself with my own strategy, which you're going to learn. So the symptoms were very similar. Back then, I didn't know completely what was going on. I was still kind of new in the nutrition game. And it took me a while to do some digging, but I went back to everything that I'd learned. I started trying to get back into all my old habits. But the part that was missing at that time was my mindset. When anybody that struggled with depression, anxiety, it can come, with all the best of intentions and all the knowledge in the world that you might have, there's no motivation. There's no motivation often for you to even want to try and change things. You just kind of live in this very state. And I was there for a very long time. Anyways, thankfully, I was able to get myself out of it once I realized what was going on, that it was completely hormonal. And when I addressed the underlying causes, which you're going to learn about tonight, I slowly started to find me again. And things were fantastic and have been until 18 months ago, when perimenopause decided to come knocking at my door. And the same symptoms, a lot of the same symptoms started to come and happen all over again. So the natural transition might have been different than it was back in 2008, but the symptoms are the same because it was a hormonal imbalance, and the severity of hormonal imbalance was again related to underlying health issues that were very similar. So keep that in mind as we walk through, but I am feeling a lot better now. And I have my bad days. And I think, again, setting realistic expectations, it's important that you understand that there is such a thing as having a bad day still. Even when you nail this strategy, you're going to have days where you slip up, you're busy, you're stressed out, or you just don't feel like it. That's normal too. So just do not beat yourself up about that. But you're going to have a strategy now, and that's going to give you your control back and your power. Okay. All right. Enough about me. Let's dive in. Okay. So we're going to scooch down here. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look through the workbook yet. If you haven't, then that's fine. You can follow along with me now. I've tried to set the workbook out to literally work as an agenda. I did that purposely because I want you to be able to go back to this workbook and just refresh your memory on everything as and when you need it. Because I said, on those bad days, or if you feel like you're slipping a little because life's been stressful, I want you to be able to go back and kind of remind yourself of the order of things and why things are the way they are and what you can do. So, as I mentioned, we're going to do today in two parts. So part one is all about releasing that overwhelm and getting you the clarity on what is going on, where you have control to take things back under your wing and get some relief from your symptoms. Part two, we will then crash through any limiting beliefs and shift your mindset into the type of mindset that you are going to need to be super successful for the long term with implementing your strategy. It's going to be the mindset that gets you through the bad days and the obstacles. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. So I think first and foremost, let's get you that clarity. So what is perimenopause? What is actually going on? So we know that perimenopause and menopause are natural transitions in our life. When it happens is partly driven by our genetics, but it can also be forced early. We could be late for certain things that are going on in our life and underlying health issues. But ultimately, between 40 and 55 is very typical range for perimenopause and menopause to start and end. There are women that start perimenopausal symptoms in their late 30s, and there are women that are still going through perimenopause in their mid 50s before they hit menopause. Menopause is defined as going 12 months without a period. So you could have gone 11 months without a period. You're not in menopause until you have done an official 12. So if you all of a sudden have a period, you're still in that perimenopausal state, and essentially you start the count again. So that's why sometimes it feels like perimenopause can go on forever and ever. So how do you know when you're in menopause? Well, we all know there is a multitude of symptoms that we could be feeling, and you may feel some of these or all of these. And sometimes it can be really hard to, sorry, I'm jumping around here. Sometimes it can be really hard to know exactly what is going on, because these symptoms can be symptoms of other things, or they're symptoms that we've experienced before and we were too young to be in perimenopause. So this is where the confusion comes in, and we're not entirely sure. You can have testing done to know that you're in menopause, but you can't necessarily know for sure that you're in perimenopause. But if your age is right about the same and your symptoms are there and thereabouts within this list, there's a high likelihood that you are in perimenopause. So this is the key that I want to hit home. I'm just looking here as the sun's moving down. I may have to jump up and put a light on because I had the blinds closed so that I didn't have lines across my face. So not all of your symptoms during perimenopause are a result of your natural hormone decline. This is the first part I need you to understand in order to know that to understand where you have control over making improvement to your symptoms that you are experiencing. Okay. In fact, most of the symptoms that you will experience during perimenopause, they are a result of our own habits, how we nurture our body, just in conjunction with the natural hormone decline that is starting to happen of our estrogen and our progesterone, of our reproductive hormones. So it's important that you understand that there is a nature and a nurture part to this, and we're going to dive into that now. So for that to make sense, let's just clarify what exactly are we talking about when we talk about hormone and hormonal imbalance. So we know that our hormones are, well, we know they can be very annoying, or at least the symptoms they cause can be very annoying, but without them, we would just not function. Hormones are the messengers within our body that deliver messages. They work together like a team, at least they're supposed to, in harmony to control essentially every body process that we have. So our mood, our sleep, our fertility, whether we're hungry or not, whether our metabolism is fast or slow, whether we are aging quickly or slowly, whether we can stand certain temperature, like in intense temperatures, really cold, really hot. Our hormones are responsible for this. Each hormone has its own unique job, but they must work together with other hormones in balance for the job to be done well. Bear with me. I'm just going to move that blind. Otherwise, I'm going to blind you. So bear with me 1 second. All right. Okay. That's a little bit better. I'm going to move this around actually. As it moves down, I may have to move again. Note for self. I'll figure that out for tomorrow night. Okay. All right. So we need our hormones to work and we need them to work in balance. But how do they fall out of balance? This is the problem, right? We know that there are times in our life where they will fall out of balance naturally. Puberty, obviously, we see I have a 14-year-old turning 15 in August, and she is going through it herself. Then we have childbirth, and we have perimenopause, menopause. They're the most common transitions. There are other things that can happen, whether they are natural or forced upon us with, due to certain health issues, but they are definitely the most natural transitions. In other words, something that it's going to happen, and how we go through those transitions, that's the nurture part. There are going to be natural shifts in hormones, but how we nurture our bodies affects the balance of a lot of the supporting hormones, the other hormones that are responsible for processes within our body as well. So the nature part to some degrees where we don't have the control. This is where your genetics come into play, but our nurture is our habits, our long-term persistent poor nutrition and lifestyle habits. And sometimes we don't even know the for. And that's the interesting part. We get into the nutrition tomorrow because it's not just about eating healthy. You may be eating healthy, but are you eating things in the right combinations? Or are you stressing your gut health out simply by the way you're eating? So we'll get more into that tomorrow. So what types of symptoms are we talking, or so what types of habits are we talking about that are considered the nurture side of things, the part we have control over? Well, it's when we live a life of chronic stress or poor quality sleep based on our own habits, not going to bed early enough, not giving ourselves enough time to have a decent sleep. not preparing a relaxing bedtime routine. Toxic overload. If we live a life or eat a certain diet or we're surrounded by an environment that is loaded with toxins that we're inhaling, then we end up in a toxic overload state. And this will affect our hormonal imbalance as well. Alternatively, on the other side with our nutrition, it's deficiencies. So if we are deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, then that is also going to affect our hormonal imbalance. And there are specific deficiencies that really rear their head when it comes to perimenopausal symptoms. Vitamin D, B6, magnesium are the biggest ones, zinc as well. There are others. You may have nutrient deficiencies based on how you eat, or you may have nutrient deficiencies because even though you're trying to eat healthy, maybe your gut isn't able to digest properly, break your food down adequately, and therefore you're not able to absorb the nutrients and get them into the bloodstream where they need to be. So nutrient deficiencies can happen in a couple of ways too. Inactivity and increased fat stores. These, now this is obviously inactivity is more of a habit of ours, something that we have control over, but the result being an increase in our fat stores if we are more sedentary than active, that is going to also affect our hormonal imbalance. When we exercise, this helps to regulate our insulin levels. We'll talk more about that in a second. And if we have more fat, we actually store excess toxic estrogen in our fat cells. So we need to keep that in mind as well. When you are dieting, however which way you are losing weight, you have to make sure that you're supporting a really healthy elimination, like your bowels are moving frequently, because once you start to break down fat cells, you are releasing toxins and toxic estrogen out into your bloodstream. And if it doesn't, your liver is now able to detoxify it, but if your bowels are sluggish and your whole digestive system is sluggish, you're not going to get those toxins out of your body fast enough, and they'll start to recirculate, and that will affect your hormonal imbalance. So increased fat stores definitely contributes to hormonal imbalance, but there are ways we can work on that, and we'll talk about that. But obviously inactivity tends to lead toward that as well, among other things, but that's something we do have some control over, is how active we are. Medications and hormonal treatments. So our liver is our number one. We don't give our liver enough credit. We think of our heart. Clearly that's important. Otherwise we wouldn't be alive, and our brain, but the liver doesn't get the clout that it really deserves, because our liver is our main regulator, our main filter. It is our main cleanser, and it's our detoxifier. And if we are constantly putting things into our body that are hard for the liver to break down or detoxify because they're not something natural that it needs as building blocks, we're going to tire the liver out. So this is why, I mean, if you're on medications long-term for specific reasons, there's a reason you're on them. And I certainly would never tell you to go off of them, not without talking to a doctor first. However, it's just being aware that when you are on long-term medications, they are going to put a strain on your liver. And the longer your liver is under a burden, and we'll talk about more of that in a second in the connection, your hormones are going to struggle, because your liver regulates your blood hormone levels. So we need to really think about what we can do to support our liver. So synthetic hormone treatment, this is one of the negatives to it. So again, if it works for you, or you know someone that it has worked for them and you've been debating it yourself, I'm not here to tell you not to do it. It's a personal choice, but just knowing the pros and cons, I think, of both sides is important in order to make an informed decision. And synthetic hormone treatments are obviously not something the body typically recognizes. You know, you're taking them to try and replace hormones that are declining, but if they're synthetic, it's not something real that the liver certainly knows what to do with. And my medications long-term, it'll do the same thing. Plus, there are certain medications that will affect the gut lining as well. We know if we take too much ibuprofen or Tylenols, that type of thing, if we take it too regularly, that can affect our gut lining too. And then, of course, there's any medical conditions or autoimmune conditions that are underlying that, of course, that puts you at a slight disadvantage in the sense that these are also going to play into a hormonal balance. They kind of fall more under nature than nurture. But as you can see here, the point I'm trying to make, ladies, is that there is a long list here of habits that, for the most part, we have total control over, and we need to start thinking about shifting them in order to get our hormones back in balance. So how do they fall out of balance? Whoops, I keep jumping around. I got a jumpy little cursor here. So how do these habits impact our hormonal balance? As I mentioned before, they create underlying health issues. And what happens when we have these underlying health issues as a result of our habits, our long-term chronic lifestyle and nutrition choices that may not be the best, we create these underlying health issues. And often the symptoms are minor, so we don't even know they're there. You don't even need to be diagnosed. You don't have to have a diagnosed gut issue, for example, to have symptoms of a hormonal imbalance that's affected by your gut health. Your gut can simply be not digesting properly, and you might feel some gas and you might feel some bloating, but for the most part, everybody does here and there. So we think it's normal. And so we don't really seek any help for that, but knowing that that actually is something that needs improving, because common, like regular gas and bloating isn't normal, and it's a sign that the gut needs some help. And once you give it that help, you'll be amazed at how everything else starts to fall into place, because it's a domino effect, and a lot of things start in the gut. So ultimately, how do you address the underlying health issues that are the root cause of your hormonal imbalance? You address the nurture habits. So that's it. You go back to that list and you address those habits to address the underlying root cause of hormonal imbalance and poor health overall. What are these underlying health issues? There are 5 or 6 if you split up adrenal and thyroid. Insulin resistance, adrenal and thyroid dysfunction, poor gut health, overburdened liver, and chronic inflammation. These are the 5 or 6 underlying root cause imbalances that we may or may not be aware of that are definitely making your perimenopausal symptoms worse. Remember, you are going to feel some symptoms as a result of estrogen and progesterone naturally starting to decline. That's inevitable. That's nature. But the severity, think about how some women seem to just breeze through perimenopause and menopause, and they barely even notice a change. And then you have women like us that, oh my gosh, everything seems to just be malfunctioning. And just when you think you figured it out, something else is wrong. What makes us different? Well, it's nature and it's nurture. Yes, they may be lucky on the genetic front, and maybe there's something in their DNA that means that they're going to have an easier time of the natural hormone decline part. But then the nurture is the side where we have so much control and we don't give it enough credit, that we just plod along with habits that we're so used to having, and we don't realize the damage that we're doing, or making the underlying health imbalances worse, and therefore our symptoms, which they seem to be exacerbated during perimenopause because they all work together with estrogen and progesterone. So we need to address these 5. So that's the part I want to hit home right now. I hope this is starting to paint a picture. I'm trying to walk you through it in steps. Let me know in chat if this is starting to even remotely give you a little bit of clarity as to what's going on. And are you starting to believe that there may actually be something that you have some control over? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Excellent. That's what I want to hear. So I'm going to keep going. Remember those 5 underlying health issues. Okay. So now we're going to zero in on, there's lots of hormones that play massive, important roles in our body, but we don't have all day, all year to go through everything. But we don't need to. What we need to talk about is the specific hormones that are at play during perimenopause and menopause, because these are the ones that are causing your symptoms to all of a sudden pop out of nowhere that you didn't seem to have before, right? So we're going to focus on those specifically and what it is that causes the imbalance. So first and foremost, estrogen and progesterone. So we know these are the reproductive hormones, and these are the ones that Mother Nature decides when it's time that they decline, okay? And like I said, depending on your genetics, you might start earlier, you might start later, but they will start to decline. It's important to know, though, first of all, that your progesterone is going to drop first, unless, of course, there's anything that's forcing you into a faster or earlier menopause, any medications. Typically, naturally, progesterone will fall first before estrogen. Estrogen will start to decline after progesterone. So keep that in mind. Now, estrogen and progesterone ideally are in perfect balance. When they are, we feel amazing. And when we're younger, perimenopause, for the most part, they are, unless you have some other genetic issue or underlying health issue that's predisposed you to an imbalance earlier on. They would be the ladies that have had fibroids or endometriosis or something like that at a very young age. If it's the first time that you're noticing that estrogen and progesterone are starting to fall out of balance, that's when you're going to start to notice symptoms of that imbalance. So poor diet and lifestyle habits can lead to having what's called a toxic load, a toxic overload. The more toxic our body is, so that's foods going in that aren't really foods, or our gut is really sensitive and intolerant to, and we'll be focusing more on that tomorrow. Our lifestyle habits, obviously things like smoking, excessive drinking, not exercising. So, we're not getting as much oxygenation, other lifestyle habits as well, chronic stress. We're going to talk about that one a lot. These will all lead to toxic overload as we continue to live this life. And this will then lead to a widening in that imbalance. This is where a condition called estrogen dominance starts to happen. And estrogen dominance is not a condition that you want to have happen, because it's putting you in it's basically saying you're in a toxic state, and it's putting you at risk of symptoms and future health issues that no woman wants to deal with. And I can tell you right now, I am estrogen dominant. I am working on it. It is a lot better than it was, but I physically had hormonal testing done because I suspected it. And voila, as suspected, I'm estrogen dominant. And the reason I wanted to share that with you is because if you know you are, or you think you might be, especially when you do that assessment, please don't panic. It's good to know. We need to know. What awareness and knowing what you're dealing with is half of the battle. And then we can start to take the right steps to fix it. I'm not surprised that I'm estrogen dominant, because I've led a very stressful last couple of years with emigrating, reestablishing our lives in the middle of a pandemic, plus my own perimenopausal decline happening anyway. So chronic stress is a huge contributor to toxic estrogen overload. And it also helps, it also causes your progesterone, a toxic state causes your progesterone to drop. What do I mean by toxic state? High levels of cortisol, stress, constant releasing of cortisol. That's been my life. I'm a type A. Those type A people, type A personality, go-getter, perfectionist. We never quite switch off. Cortisol tends to race around our body like our blood. And this is the problem, is that over time, it puts us in a toxic state. It causes inflammation that our body doesn't need, and inflammation is toxic, essentially. So estrogen dominance, it's important to understand, is essentially too much toxic estrogen in relation to progesterone. That's what estrogen dominance is. It confuses people a lot who are aware of the condition because they think, well, how can I be estrogen dominant if my estrogen is declining because I'm in perimenopause? Remember, there's different kinds of estrogen. I'm not going to bamboozle you with all of that. You don't need to know. Just know there's good estrogen and then there's bad toxic estrogen. Bad toxic estrogen levels tend to get higher based on our lifestyle and our exposure to toxins, nutrition as well. And then you've got the good estrogen, which is what makes us feel great when we're younger. And as that declines, we get the hot flashes, we lose the energy, our skin dries, all the fun stuff. Okay, so knowing that there's different kinds of estrogen is important. But the reason we typically can be put ourselves at risk of estrogen dominance is because progesterone will drop first. Remember, I mentioned that before. Estrogen will come down second. Progesterone will drop faster if you are in a high stress state because cortisol, which is your stress hormone, is created from progesterone. So your adrenal glands will steal progesterone to create cortisol, essentially, which then goes racing around your body, thinking it's doing you a justice and telling your body to be on alert all the time. So ideally, your symptoms, I should say, the natural hormone decline symptoms that you would typically experience, and we all, even if you have a great, easy ride through perimenopause because you're doing everything else right and your genetics are perfect, you're going to still notice, you're going to notice a hormone decline as your estrogen and progesterone do gently start to fall down. But when they start to tank, or when progesterone starts to tank and your toxic estrogen levels are rising, this is when you feel like your symptoms are in overdrive. The bigger the gap, the more severe the symptoms. So keep that in mind, estrogen and progesterone. Even though most of this is certainly part of natural hormone decline, we are contributing to the severity of the gap as progesterone drops first and estrogen does come down eventually later, but the toxic will keep it up there for a while. Okay. Estrogen dominance will lead to long-term female health issues. So osteoporosis, bone loss, breast health issues. We start to experience more fibrocystic breasts, ovarian cysts, breast cysts. We get ovarian cysts too, but we're talking about the breasts, even breast cancer. So estrogen dominance is often at the root cause. It's certainly in there with a cause of any of those female hormone-related conditions. Fibroids, endometriosis, same thing. So keep that in mind. Too much estrogen in relation to progesterone is going to cause chronic inflammation. It's an acidic state in the body that leads to most chronic health issues. So yes, there's a natural decline, but we can even control the severity of that decline. And that's the nurture part. Then we need to look at insulin and glucagon. So insulin and glucagon, these are the hormones responsible for balancing your blood sugar levels. So right here, we can see why poor dietary habits are going to lead to blood sugar spikes and crashes. Okay, so obviously if we're eating too much sugar, or we are just overran by cravings and we are constantly taking in sugar when we know we should, or not just sugar, but starchy, lots of starchy, simple carbohydrates, the refined white stuff, your white flour, your white rice, your white pastas. These are going to convert into glucose super fast because they are simple, refined carbohydrates. They're almost as bad as sugar on its own. So if you eat a lot of this, whether it's muffins, breads, pastries, anything that I call beige, it's like a beige diet, not a rainbow colored diet, but a beige diet, chances are you are spiking your blood sugar more often than not. And when your blood sugar spikes, insulin has to come to the rescue. So it gets flushed into the bloodstream from your pancreas to try and bring those levels back down. The more you have insulin in your bloodstream, the longer it's there and the more amounts of insulin that are in your bloodstream, lots of icky stuff happens. Your cells, who were supposed to take in the insulin, say, thank you, I need that for energy. sorry, it's going to take in the insulin to balance out the glucose that's in the cells, which it needs for energy. The cells are going to become resistant. It's like anything. If you overwork something, or you've heard of the children's story where Peter cries wolf. After a while of constantly crying wolf, wolf, when there isn't really a wolf, eventually nobody believes him, right? It's the same sort of thing with your cells. If insulin's constantly knocking on the door because there's floods of blood sugar in the bloodstream, spiking the blood sugar, eventually the cells say, no more. I don't need this much glucose, because we're not expending that much energy. Unless you're running a marathon, or unless you are doing some strenuous workout, you don't need the amount of energy that simple sugars and refined carbohydrates flood into the bloodstream with. So what happens is insulin's job is to try and give it to the cells. The cells become resistant and say, no, I don't need all of this. Take it and store it. Insulin is your fat storage hormone. So when you store the fat, we know what happens. It's hard to shift, and we slowly start to see it starting to add up. Insulin is your fat storage hormone. Glucagon, it's opposite. Remember, all hormones have a little partner they hold hands with, even though they're supposed to all work together. They all have a little partner. Glucagon is his opposing partner. Glucagon is the fat burning hormone. If insulin is high, glucagon will be low. Insulin's high, you're in fat storage mode. Glucagon will be low. There's no fat burning going on. So how do we switch off the fat storage and switch on the fat burning? We've got to keep our insulin levels down so that glucagon can go back up. How do we keep insulin levels down? We don't eat in a way that our blood sugar is constantly spiking. So therefore, there is no need for these constant floods of insulin into the bloodstream. Does this make sense? It's important you understand these. This is the educational bit. Your mind might be going pochoing right now, but this is why I want to walk you through the workbook so you can go back and familiarize yourself with this at any time. But you need to understand this, because this is what's going to make you realize where you have so much control. So too much insulin could make you insulin resistant, and it also sets you up for pre-diabetes. Too much insulin, too little glucagon, which is your fat burning hormone. So therefore you're in fat storage mode. Too much fat storage, as I mentioned before, is going to increase your toxic estrogen stores, the estrone, which is the bad estrogen. And too much bad estrogen leads to chronic inflammation. You'll notice as I go through each of these hormone categories, the bold at the bottom, starting to see a trend. They all lead to one of those 5 underlying health issues. Let's move on. Cortisol, DHEA. These are 2 other opposing hormones that are supposed to work nicely in balance together. How does our cortisol spike? You've probably heard this a lot, because stress is finally starting to get the attention that it deserves. Excess stress for long periods of time, or stress spikes way too regularly, we're going to have all this cortisol flooding through our bloodstream. Over time, our adrenals burn out. And you know what burnout feels like if you've ever experienced it. If you've experienced it, let me know in the comments. I have experienced it actually not that long ago, while I was discovering that I was in perimenopause as well, while reestablishing my life, while rebuilding a business. I took on too much, and I wasn't managing my stress well. That's why I'm not surprised I ended up in an estrogen dominant state, but I know how to fix it. So cortisol, we need to be careful of those high levels of cortisol. As I mentioned before, too much cortisol will reduce progesterone, because progesterone is needed to create cortisol. That's going to make the natural declining progesterone drop even lower. If you're also living a toxic lifestyle, and we'll talk about more what a toxic lifestyle actually is on day 3 and what toxic nutrition is tomorrow on day 2. But if you are living a toxic lifestyle and eating in a toxic way that's increasing your toxic estrogen, and then you're super stressed and your cortisol levels are sucking all your progesterone, so your progesterone is dropping even lower, that gap's widening, right? The wider the gap, the more severe the symptoms. We need to close the gap, okay? Too much cortisol, again, because it's a stress hormone, it will increase your estrogen, the bad estrogen. And what happens with too much cortisol in the body? Oh, look, there's those words again. Chronic inflammation and an overburdened liver, because your liver has to detoxify cortisol. It has to regulate everything that's in your blood. And if it's too busy having to worry about cortisol, it's not having a chance to balance everything else out. Then there's ghrelin and leptin. Now, ghrelin and leptin, these two hormones are your hunger hormones. So these are the ones that determine whether you're super hungry or not hungry at all. And therefore, they're important hormones to be aware of. They don't get the attention that they should, because we're not talking estrogen and progesterone, right? When we think perimenopause, that's what we think about. But they are a huge influencer on your ability to manage your weight or to lose weight. Our metabolism naturally is starting to slow as our natural hormone decline is happening. But so it's throwing off our other hormones. If we can't get our ghrelin and our leptin in balance, that contributes to those cravings. And we know what happens when you have cravings. All willpower seems to go right out the window, and you're kicking yourself because you just had that donut. How do ghrelin and leptin fall out of balance? Lack of sleep and super stress again. It's that cortisol. Cortisol, it's a force to be reckoned with, but we can fix cortisol. We can manage it. We just need to know how. So lack of sleep, which sometimes you can find that you're in a vicious cycle when you're in perimenopause, because you have these symptoms that won't allow you to sleep, right? So you feel like you're in this constant flux. But where you do have control to improve your sleep routine, to go to bed at a decent time, to turn off blue light devices, for example, within an hour of going to bed, these are all things that are going to help you to actually sleep better. There's other stuff, but again, it's focusing on where you have control, and every small change does add up and makes a difference to the severity of your symptoms. So when we are lacking sleep and our stress is high, our ghrelin naturally increases. When one goes up, the other has to come down. Leptin is your satiation hormone. Leptin, if that was high, would say, I'm full. I don't even want the sugar. But if ghrelin is high, you are craving everything, and leptin doesn't stand a chance. Okay, so you need to keep them in mind. Too much ghrelin, look at the bold here, ladies, is excessive sugar cravings, which leads to insulin resistance. That was at the top of the list of the underlying 5 issues. Then you got thyroid hormone. High cortisol levels, which are a result of our adrenal glands pumping out stress, they will eventually cause the adrenals to become sluggish. Like I said, it's burnout. You overwork anything. You start thinking of your body like a car, and we should probably treat it as good as we treat our cars, but if you overwork it and keep revving the engine constantly and not changing its oil and giving it all of the nutrients that it needs, eventually things start to burn out. High cortisol, constant cortisol levels will burn out your adrenals. These adrenals will then dampen your thyroid function as well, because they work together. If your thyroid is struggling, maybe you've been diagnosed with hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, an autoimmune condition of the thyroid. If you have that, this is where nature comes into play. Obviously, if you had it from an early age, a thyroid issue, it's a genetic thing, then you are more predisposed to having issues. So you just have to focus in more on where you do have control to alleviate your symptoms. Adrenals, if they are exhausted and burnt out, they're only going to make the thyroid performance worse. So by supporting your adrenals, managing your stress, getting those cortisol levels down, you are doing your thyroid such a favor as well. And like I said, the reverse is also true. Thyroid dysfunction will affect your adrenals as well. But typically it tends to be the other way around, because we are a very stressed nation. So high cortisol will equal sluggish adrenals, which will also equal reduced thyroid hormone. Too little thyroid hormone causes our metabolism to be even more sluggish, and we are exhausted and we cannot regulate our temperature. So those women that really struggle with the hot flashes and the night sweats, chances are their thyroid is struggling. You don't have to be diagnosed with a hypothyroidism or anything like that to have a tired thyroid, but that's all it takes. So we need to support the adrenal and the thyroid, and we do that through nutrition and lifestyle. So at the end of the day, thyroid dysfunction and adrenal dysfunction are going to result in an overburdened liver, because if they're out of whack, all of the hormones are out of whack, and the liver is responsible for trying to regulate them. So now the liver's going, oh my gosh, now I have all this extra work to do again. So an overburdened liver equals the inability to regulate and metabolize your thyroid hormone. So you're in this vicious cycle. Again, we need to break the cycle, and we do that by changing our habits. Last but not least, in the hormone education section, we're getting there, but I hope this is helping. Neurotransmitters. So these are also hormones too, but we call them neurotransmitters, and these are the mental health hormones that we think about: serotonin, dopamine, melatonin, and GABA, the primary ones. So they have similar messenger roles to hormones, and they are the ones that they help us to sleep, they help us feel happy. There are mood hormones for the most part, and they are heavily influenced by chronic inflammation. So the more inflamed we are, the less the lower the levels of these hormones. Also, these neurotransmitters, serotonin, melatonin, they are actually manufactured primarily in our gut. We think of them always being in our brain because they have such a huge impact on our mental health and our cognitive function. And that's true, but there is what's called a gut-brain connection. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow in day 2. But the gut-brain connection is huge. If your gut is not in good shape, it's not going to be making adequate amounts of these happy hormones, these neurotransmitters. Most of your serotonin is produced in your gut. And if your gut can't make it, you're not getting it. And then it speaks to your brain. Your brain is cloudy. You've got brain fog. You are struggling to make decisions. You seeing the pattern here? And what I mean by your gut can be out of balance or not functioning well, again, you don't have to have some big diagnosis of celiac disease or gastroenteritis or diverticulitis. It doesn't even need to be something this specific. It's the excess gas, the excess bloating, the pain and the indigestion that just keeps happening every time you eat. The reactions, the skin reactions to certain foods, the intolerances, the flatulence, the lack of bowel habits. Maybe you have diarrhea. Unfortunately, we've started to normalize a lot of these symptoms. So unless they are causing increasing pain or increasing discomfort, we don't typically do anything about them. We just go along thinking they're normal. These are all signs that your gut microbiome is out of balance. And all, it's a fancy name, but all your microbiome is the home. It's the balance of all the things your digestive system needs to do its job. So it needs healthy levels of all different strains of good bacteria. It needs all the stomach acid, all the right healthy, sufficient levels of what's called hydrochloric acid, the stomach acid that's needed to break your proteins down, especially. And you need all the enzymes. You need all of those things in perfect levels and harmony to digest your food perfectly. If you're not, your microbiome is out of balance. It's not healthy. It's not digesting properly. And therefore, you're not absorbing nutrients properly either. So now you're starting to see the domino effect again. Remember, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin, all of those, you feel them up here, but they're created down there. So there's your connection. High anxiety. My serotonin levels are through the floor when I got my hormones tested. Not surprising. I was estrogen dominant. I was in a toxic state. My cortisol levels were through the roof. Well, they had been through the roof. They were also crashing when they should have been up. because my adrenals are now close to burnout. I'm turning that around, thankfully, and I'm feeling the benefits of it. But I am a living, walking case study of this. But I'm also a living, walking case study that can be fixed. So I'm going to get to questions in a second, so I can see stuff or comments or questions popping into the chat. So gut microbiome, how does it fall out of balance? Similar things, same habits we talked about before. Chronic use of medications, chronic use of antibiotics that kill off our good bacteria, chronic use of antacids. That's a whole other story. We're going to talk about antacids tomorrow. If you take antacids on a regular basis for acid reflux, I'm going to explain to you tomorrow why that could be an issue that you might want to get on top of. And I'll tell you how. High acidic, low nutrient dietary choices, poor eating habits, not just what we eat, but how we eat. It's all combinations to ease the digestive process. We're not eating to make digestion easy. We're going to put more of a strain on the digestive system. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Chronic stress slows down digestion. Every process in our body is, for the most part, it has to keep moving and function. Otherwise, we would die, right? Our cardiovascular system is our heart. Our endocrine system is our hormones. And if they stop talking to each other, nothing happens. We die. Respiratory, we can't breathe. We die. Digestion, our digestive process, as important as it is, and long term, if we didn't have a digestive process, we would die. In the short term, it can be halted. Why it's important to know that is because it's important to understand the impact chronic stress has on your gut. Again, we don't give it enough credit. When you are under constant levels of stress and cortisol runs in to save the day and do the fight or flight response and tell everybody, tell all the other processes, the heart to beat, the muscles and the skeletal system to run away from the danger, the respiratory system to breathe fast and heavy. These are all natural fight or flight responses for survival. And our cortisol is the hormone that's running around telling us to do all of this. Digestion can be halted because we can survive without food for quite a while in comparison. So digestion will shut down. And when you're under constant stress, it will stay shut down. And this is why you're still eating, but digestion isn't happening. This is where gut health gets really a problem, but it can be rebalanced. So those hormones, those neurotransmitters, we know that's important you understand them and the impact of them and what happens with them if you are struggling with anxiety and the mood swings and cognitive function, brain fog, lack of alertness. These are all very typical perimenopausal symptoms. And hopefully now you can see where you can so make a difference in those. So in summary, got to go to the bold line, too much toxic overload. This is a summary of those. Too much toxic overload, whether it's from the environment, heavy metals, chemical exposure from food, skincare that we rub onto our skin, we absorb it into our skin, chemicals everywhere. Toxic overload will cause chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation increases bad gut health. Bad gut health results in an overburdened liver. Overburdened liver can't regulate your hormones. So every single one, I know that was a bit of a long explanation, but when you go back and look through that workbook at each of those couples of very specific perimenopausal hormones, the ones that come into play, I should say, during perimenopause, you will see a trend. 5 underlying health issues will be at the root of your hormonal imbalance. We're almost at the end of part 1. So in summary, natural hormone decline is inevitable. Genetics, yes, it plays a part in the timing of things, and to some degree, whether or not you have certain estrogen and progesterone declining symptoms worse than others or not. But significant hormonal imbalance is a result primarily of how we nurture our body. The ones that are really exhausting and debilitating and frustrating, they're the ones we actually have a lot of control over. And then the natural decline of estrogen and progesterone, it's not as debilitating because the other hormones are able to do their jobs more effectively. So they're not impacting on each other. So we have the ability to significantly reduce the severity of your perimenopausal symptoms, and in some cases may even eliminate them. It is known to happen. And we can support our natural body processes to allow us to look and feel our best through perimenopause, while also setting our body up to be in a less inflamed state, a less toxic state, a more balanced state, which ultimately is what's going to give you a higher fighting chance of repelling chronic illness in the future. So we have significant control over all of these body processes: metabolism, temperature regulation, blood sugar management, mood regulation. Think about it. All of these processes, these natural body processes, they all are responsible for regulating things that when they aren't regulated, we get symptoms of perimenopause. Weight management, because the thyroid's not functioning properly. There's your metabolism. Hot flashes, night sweats, temperature regulation. Blood sugar management, again, affects your weight gain, affects your energy levels when you're constantly spiking and crashing. Mood regulation, anxiety, depression, swings. This is your neurotransmitters that are being affected. Same thing with cognitive function. Digestion, nutrient absorption, and immunity. We have control over that to a large degree by making sure that we don't have gut dysbiosis, which is imbalance in good and bad bacteria. Liver function, and how well our liver detoxifies excess toxic estrogen and other toxins from the body, and how well we eliminate them. Energy, skin, better bowel habits, all symptoms of perimenopause. Inflammation reduction, that's all to do with balancing our pH, reducing our inflammation. We do that through diet and lifestyle. And we know what inflammation causes: muscle aches, joint pain. So symptoms of perimenopause again. Our energy transport and how well we are oxygenated. Are we getting enough cardio health? Are we exercising? Are we getting out there and walking? Again, simple lifestyle habit, but helps oxygenating our body. And stress management, I put it at the bottom, but it should be at the top. It's something we focus on. Like, regulate that cortisol. Our body will handle stress better. And trust me, everything will slowly start to calm down. So in summary, guys, part 1, do you see the link? Did that make sense? This, I hope, is a lesson that you will take with you for the rest of your life. It was a long one, but it was walked through in steps. Let me know. This little blurb here in pink is essentially all you need to know. To restore a healthy hormone balance and reduce your risk of chronic illness for years to come, you must change your nutrition and lifestyle habits to rebalance those 5 common underlying health issues that are the root cause of your symptoms. How did that hit home? All right, I'm going to come back and have a look at some of the comments we got in here. We have in Zoom at the moment. Brandy says in the middle of it, yes. Mariel, I'm really interested in learning how to decrease my appetite naturally. I'm on Ozempic and I hate the side effects. Ah, yes. Okay, exactly. And that will be the case. We will talk more about the nutrition side of things tomorrow for sure, Mariel. I know there's so much to get through tonight. I will note your comment here and I will specifically have it addressed tomorrow. Very informative. Yes, I'm out of time. We'll watch the rest on replay. No problem. That's okay. I'd rather you have more than not enough, and that's what the recordings are for. Randy says it's finally make everything I'm going through make sense. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty amazing. I'm just looking here. If we have any comments? I'm not even sure if I can see the comments in the Facebook group. Let's just have a quick look here. Yes, Michelle, I'm in and I can, oh, that's at the beginning. This is so empowering. So much can be controlled with nutrition and lifestyle, and that is so encouraging, honestly. Thank you. You're welcome. And this is it. I mean, yes, it's been, by the time we got all my introductions over, we've probably had a good hour of going through what, in my opinion, is the most important part, because this is where we start to shift your mindset. This is how we segue into part 2, which will not be as long. Don't worry. in order to make any advances, to achieve success in any type of transformation, or certainly health transformation, but any transformation, any goal that you're trying to get to, you have to break through limiting beliefs that are going to pull you back, especially on the bad days. There are going to be days, as I said, we're all human, and this is a transition. It's a natural transition. Your mindset is what's going to determine whether you get through it with ease on those good days, and you might struggle on a bad day, but you'll still get through it, versus not carrying on, essentially falling backwards into a fixed mindset. So what is a mindset? First of all, it's a pre-established set of attitudes that you have. Often they come from childhood, but they could very well come as we age, and depending on our surroundings and the people that we associate with, whether it's school or even in our adult lives, we develop a certain set of attitudes and beliefs, and they do dictate a large part of how we run our life. They play a critical role in how you're going to cope with life's challenges, and there will be challenges as we go through. Even as you get your handle on this strategy, you are going to still have bad days. So you need to have the right mindset to keep pulling you back, as opposed to drifting off course. And ideally, what you're doing here is you need to move from a fixed to a growth mindset. So a fixed mindset, there's a slight typo in here, guys. It's people that do not believe that new skills and abilities can be developed and strengthened through commitment and hard work. That's why I've spent so much time on the first part of this, because I want you to understand where you do have the ability, by developing skills and perfecting abilities you may already have and strengthening them and staying committed, you can make huge changes. Those with a fixed mindset will always feel that there's nothing they can do to tackle a problem. They're the ones that will be happy to believe that perimenopause and menopause is a part of our lives. Nothing we can do about it. Suck it up. It is what it is. It's life as we know it is over. All those horrible things that we are often heard, we often hear, and it's just not true. There is so much that we can do, but if you're in a fixed mindset, you won't believe that. These are the limiting beliefs that I'm hoping that we can break tonight. So those with a fixed mindset feel there's nothing they can do to tackle the problem. It's out of reach. It's out of their skill set. And they often feel that they're just, anything that they believe they can do is just going to get judged and scrutinized. A growth mindset, on the other hand, is one where people feel they can learn and develop the skills, the abilities, and the tools needed to solve that problem, rather than feeling defeated. So on a bad day, yeah, you might slide backwards a little bit, and you'll be tempted to slip back into a fixed mindset. But if you continue to work on that growth mindset, it will carry you through. So why do you require that growth mindset? Ultimately, as I said, it's going to carry you through. Just going to scooch along here a little bit because I am conscious of time. So are mindset shifts possible? Absolutely. It sometimes feels very impossible that you could actually have control over something so big that happens in a woman's life. We assume that most women are going to struggle. The ones that don't, we just assume it's their genetics, and to some degree, it may be certainly a part of it, but I guarantee you they're doing a lot on the nurture side too. And now you're going to as well. So how do you nurture a growth mindset? Well, here's some useful tips that you need to remind yourself of and just be aware of. You need to fully understand your why. You probably hear this a lot in life, but it is so true. On bad days where you're being challenged, your beliefs are being challenged, and your commitment to any goal that you're going after is being challenged, you need to constantly keep reminding yourself why you're doing it and why it's so important to you. You need to remember this is a marathon and not a sprint. You can't take shortcuts with your health. To some degree, an antidepressant, anti-anxieties, sleeping pills, they are shortcuts. And yes, they may give you some quick relief fast, but there are side effects. There are long-term complications that could come of it. And hopefully now you understand just how important it is to keep your liver as cleansed as possible and able to do its job. It will regulate all your blood levels for you. But it takes time. It takes time, it takes commitment, but no one is more important and nothing is more important than you and your health. So remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You need to focus on where you're strong. Don't keep focusing on where you're going wrong. Focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. Focus on what you can control, on what you do have, not what you can control and what you don't. We need to think the reward versus the punishment system. So this goes, we'll talk more about exercise on day 3, but again, it's changing our mindset to believe that something like exercise is actually a reward. We're lucky that we have the ability to be able to do it. Even if it's minor, just movement alone, we're lucky to be able to do that. And we need to view it as a reward for making ourselves feel incredible, physical and mentally afterwards, rather than a punishment. It's something that we have to do that makes us miserable. These are really helpful tips to just keep reminding yourself. Goal setting, you want to make sure that you're breaking your larger health transformation goal down into small chunks. As we go through the rest of this strategy over the next couple of days, and you're going to learn how you can improve your sleep habits, improve your stress management habits, you want each one of those things to be a milestone in itself, something that has got more of a short-term goal, something that you can measure. When you get there, you celebrate the heck out of it, because there are going to be days where you feel like you're probably, that big goal seems so far away. It's not, you're getting closer every day, but having those small milestones in between is going to do a lot for your mindset and keep it in a growth space where it needs to be. And practicing self-care, self-love, and self-worth. I saw so many of you in your introductions explaining that you're trying desperately to give yourself the self-care you need, and that is music to my ears. If you haven't been doing up until now, you certainly need to be doing it now. So practicing self-love, practicing self-worth, we can start with our homework. And this is something that I want you to seriously take on as something that you focus on daily. Now, don't panic when I say the word homework. I'm not going to slap your wrists if it's not done by 9 o'clock in the morning. This is where the homework is simply for you to take a look at this. Oops, let's scooch back up. We start with exercise 1, the growth mindset worksheet. I want you to start giving it thought tonight and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. I want this to be something that you keep coming back and looking at and practicing flexing that growth mindset muscle. Exercise 1, all this is here is it's getting you to start to think about how you might be thinking if you have a fixed mindset versus how I want you to think with a growth mindset. So step 1 is I want you to start thinking about shifting the way you value certain things. For an example, outcome. We always focus on the outcome. We're rushing our life away to get to the weekend. We're rushing our life away to get 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road when menopause is finally hit and all this perimenopausal stuff is over. We need to focus on the process and how we can improve our process now and live now. Otherwise, we're wasting our life away. So it's shifting what we value. Perfectionism is another perfect example. I am one of these, and this has been something that I've really had to work on. I will burn myself out trying to be perfect and trying to create the perfect program. There are going to be things you're going to notice through this challenge. There are going to be mistakes that I have made. I've already underjudged how long we're going to take tonight. But it's important, I think, that you have all of this and that you get the clarity I want you to have so badly. The point is, next time I'll learn, you know what? This is probably a 90-minute versus a 60-minute. So I'll advertise that. It's a mistake. We learn from it. Nobody's perfect. See what I mean? It's shifting our mindset. If we keep putting all of these pressures on ourselves that are on the right-hand column, we're not living for now and we're stressing ourselves out unnecessarily. Growth mindset on the right, fixed mindset on the left. So give that some thought and then take a look at when you talk to yourself or you have certain thoughts, start to think about, here's some examples, start to think about how you can replace that language in your head. Once you start talking to yourself in a different way, you will start to believe it. Because believe it or not, the more we talk to ourselves negatively, we actually do start to believe it. And it's amazing the impact that that has. Step 3 is to then start thinking about keeping a growth diary where you're going to look at these 3 prompts and just write a little entry each day. What was something new that you learned today so that you can celebrate that no matter how small? How did you make progress toward a goal today? Again, no matter how small, you celebrate it, you write it down. And what can you do tomorrow to just be a tiny little bit better? So maybe there was something today that you wish you'd have done better. So maybe that's what you do better tomorrow, or you try to do better. Okay, so that's the homework that I want you to start thinking about. You don't have to do it all tonight. In fact, you wouldn't be able to get the results of adopting a growth mindset and keeping it there. This is going to be something you're going to be doing, hopefully, as part of your daily routine moving forward. So just slowly, just start thinking about it is all I ask. Start thinking about it and start journaling. You just need a pad of paper and pen. You don't need anything fancy. And that's what I want you to do there. Exercise 2, this is fun. And again, you don't have to do all of these, but they are all really great exercises to start to strengthen that mindset muscle. This is a really fun one. Daily affirmations, as I said, read through this. Essentially, all you're going to do is find a jar and you're going to take those 50 daily affirmations that I gave you in the separate link. You're going to fold them up. You're going to put them in the jar, and each day you're going to pull one out. You're going to stand in front of a mirror and you are going to repeat them to yourself until you actually start to feel yourself believing it. And you'll be amazed. You don't have to sit there all day. It's amazing how when we start to, and looking yourself in the eye, that's why I suggest doing it in a mirror. You don't have to, you can do it without a mirror, but looking yourself in the eye and repeating it over and over, you actually start to see your face change from potential tension to a smile. I've seen it myself. So I definitely strongly recommend the affirmations jar exercise. And the last one you can do here in this workbook, it's interactive for you. This is where I want you to start really focusing on how you talk to yourself. Again, that negative self-talk is programming you subconsciously to think that you're not worthy enough, to think that, to feel guilty, even if you think for a second about taking some time out for your own self-care. And you're going to start to believe that you're not worth making yourself a priority for. We have to change our own self-talk from negative to positive. We don't love ourselves, we can't expect others to, right? So this is so just take a quick look over the worksheet. Start to think about things that you say to yourself that are negative. Perfect examples right here. Then I want you to challenge that thought. And then I want you to think about replacing that thought. So here's some examples. And in this interactive sheet, if you want to use the interactive sheet, you can physically write in here. So when you catch yourself talking to yourself, write it down below, select whether it was negative or positive self-talk. So anytime you're talking to yourself, hopefully the intention is that most of the time they'll end up being positive. It's just a habit now. You talk beautifully to yourself, as you should. But initially, you may find that most conversations you have with yourself, you're going to be saying negative things, and that's what you need to change. So you will physically note in here, I can't, let's think of an example. So something negative that you say to yourself, I can't believe I got as lost, is an example. In other words, you're traveling. I do this all the time. I think I know where I'm going. I'm stubborn and I don't take my map out. But then I get mad at myself. Indicate that in this case, it's a drop-down menu, that it's negative self-talk, and then think, okay, all right, so how can I reframe that? If I'm going to talk to myself about this, how can I reframe it? So instead of, I can't believe I got as lost, say, I'll know better next time to use my map first. But at least I got to see some new, different places. something like that. That's just an example. Play with this, have fun with it, erase them, use it again. If you printed off the PDF workbook, then you obviously have a written copy that you can write on as well, or just create your own little list with 2 columns. But just the key is to start focusing on it. Focus on your mindset, focus on your thoughts, focus on how you're talking to each other, and start taking a look at this homework. If you would like to share a snapshot of your homework in our group here tonight or tomorrow, tonight might be a little late, might be pushing it, anytime over the next couple of days, I would love to see how it's working for you. And don't forget, any entry of your homework, by attending a live, you've got an entry into the prize draw. They're all entries into the prize draw. So the more that you're engaging and sharing, the more entries you'll have into the prize draw for the Amazon gift card as well. So I will leave you with this saying. I have no idea who Steve Maraboli is. Maybe I should. I don't know. But it was a saying that somebody shared with me, and I grabbed it and I saved it, and I wanted to share it today. What the mind conceives is what the body achieves. Once your mindset changes, everything on the outside will change along with it. So bang on 90 minutes, even with a long introduction. So clearly it's a 90 minutes, day 1. Good to know for future. I hope you have found this helpful. I appreciate so much if you have hung on this entire 90 minutes. I'd love to hear your feedback. What were your biggest takeaways? Was there something that you wish I could change? Oh, Selena says she's trying to comment, but it cuts off. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Selena. You know what? We've been having a few techie glitches. It's, I apologize if you can't comment in there. Maybe when it's posted, you'll be able to comment. Even if you have to put a separate comment, if you've got questions, just put them in the group. Let me know that it's in reference to tonight's workshop, and I'll make sure I get any questions in the group answered that I can't quite see. It doesn't look like everything's flowing through, but I promise any questions in there you have, I will go and have a look afterwards, and I will get them answered before we start our day 2 tomorrow. So I'm going to leave you there, ladies. Lots to digest. But again, that's why we're using the workbook as your agenda, because this is information that I want you to go back and reread and refresh, especially on a day where you're starting to think that you're losing control, because you're not. In fact, you have so much control. And over the next 2 days, we're going to talk a bit more about how you can change those nurture habits, your nutrition and your lifestyle, to really start to move the needle and finally get some relief and get your life back again. All right, ladies, I will leave you there to go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Give yourself some time to relax. And again, thank you so much for your time being here. If you're watching on the replay, I hope you enjoy. And again, we'd love to hear your feedback as well. Please post your questions in the group, and I will certainly get to them all. All right, take care and keep an eye out tomorrow for your day 2 workbook, a whole new workbook coming your way. And we're talking all about nutrition. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.